Nam do be Tamam Ma Chanjo Bardo Tani Gapsu Agi Shinye Give Salam Give Kola Pinchu Sangye Rupa Shu Sangye Shunam Soje Chonam Ma Chanjo Bardo Tani Gapsu Agi Shinye Give Salam Give Kola Pinchu Sangye Rupa Shu Sangye Shunam Soje Chonam Ma Chanjo Bardo Tani Gapsu Agi Shinye Give Salam Give Kola Pinchu Sangye Rupa Shu Madalame Metamanje Ombodan Jajan Rojo Java Sanje Sumbada Shija Deve Joba Deda Shija Tabishan Jin Namo Laika Dalu Dalu Jege Duvata Menanda Punja Java Tamjake Dota Shut Olazo Nangata Danyam Sanja Tamja Yudun to Jalana Mobayan, the Wazoba Sanja Yokoba and Bujishin and Jatobasa. Te Tobara Chevachi, the Sen Mokuno Gunju, Ramana Chanjalam, the Ramani Cheda Jova, the Lava Seta Barasho. Ensemble Chevachi, the Takanji telling today. Tended Toba, the nine, but he into that and Chita, Shokanda Kang Show and Kulu Yabushi, where that be missy, Kitcheman and the Chimbuchati over it. He into that and Matana in a Castle. Moto had a meal Kobantoya, and Nikawa Shuman and Yasuna, Medoya. What you would show the two men, that Lamjin was in a Tichati in body. 아니 대zam지 지고르에서 너무도 하다 미쿠바 토바 담지 지고 말이 아니 코는 포트에 말이 뒤에 딱 간지 코디래 저와지 딱 간지 저토바지 지내야 지고 코디 저저수인데 딱 간지 코디 저저수인데 딱 코스에도 레더 유모 거 라면 인산체에 차 된대절로 코스고 말이 뒤에 딱 코에 대부들라다 동해 때마다 뒤주들다 군중다 군중들라 레주 군주다 녀모 군중세 다 군주들니 녀모 레주 군주다 녀모 군주니 요번안에 다 소소되다 간제 녀모 군주된 말 녀모 군주 머리버된 말다 머리버대 도가 잡아라다 간제 가서버래 남라버순 라바 수준이 나면 라바 시체 아니 라바 띵즈 나베 초제 아니 조조데 다 간제 남에 되게 셔럽게 딱 콜에 친구 집에 다 자와 머리 버디 그다티디 저거고요 이거 봐. 텐데지 저거데 다 간제 라바 셔럽지 라베 다 간제 저거 쳐보고 어디 다 간제 라바 셔럽지 라베 아니 저네 콜에 저도 같이 연구하면 콜에 콜제데 다 자와 머리 버디 탁버디 찡데 그 신원들의 저거고요. 타타바토라니 타바토바던지 저거 말이라니 타바토바이네 아니 심제 탐제나 거동을 넣어주데 삼베토네 아니 심제 탐제 아니 안 타베 고만을 고야치도다 손 소속이 아니 가서그래 단다 가서보여 최대다 간제 택바치비 최대인데 다 전주가 생각 시스템도네 아니 심제 탐제 타바 미네메 양을 고야치도 아니 내가 다 최대 수고유 섬다고 주소 도대체 다 된대지 된대지 소리.
So the topic for today's discourse is the poem known as Praise of Dependent Origination. For this teaching and all Dharma teachings for that matter, first thing that's important is to review your motivation and to correct your motivation, to raise your motivation, refine your motivation. This is a very important act to for listeners, especially to do. And so in Buddhism, there are, especially in the Rinpoche tradition, there are three kinds of practitioners, persons who are recognized as genuine Dharma practitioners. So the first kind is the so-called lesser person. Then that person his or her main goal is to try to ensure that one achieves the temporary Buddhist goal, which is referred to by the term higher status. The purpose for doing that is to be out of concern that if one doesn't carry out the appropriate practice, one will suffer the consequence of having to be reborn in the lower realms. So avoiding that result is a genuine and valid goal, but it's not sufficient for today's topic in particular. The reason that one should reflect is that even if one were to be reborn in the higher realms for some period of time, few lifetimes, then one is likely to fall back into the lower realms, and in any case to be continually bound in the condition of samsara, wandering helplessly, being under the control of one's own karma and mental afflictions. So the samsara condition is that, to be helplessly and uncontrollably subject to the samsaric state, which is essentially suffering, unsatisfactoriness from top to bottom. And so with that understanding, then the middling practitioner develops the aspiration to seek his or her own liberation, nirvana, freedom from samsaric existence. In order to do that, one has to understand the nature of samsara and the possibility of gaining freedom from it. So one way to do that is to learn about, among the Four Noble Truths, especially the truth of suffering, which represents a samsara condition as a result, and the truth of origination, which is the cause of that samsara condition. And that in order to free oneself, it's necessary to pursue the three Buddhist trainings of morality, mental training, one-pointed concentration, and wisdom training. So among those three trainings, morality is like the foundation of the path. Then one-pointed concentration is a necessary support for the true antidote. The true antidote for samsaric existence is the wisdom, the training that leads to the attainment of the kind of wisdom that realizes that among the causes of samsaric existence, the principal cause is the mental afflictions. And among the mental afflictions, the root cause, the primary cause for all the other mental afflictions is ignorance. And so the antidote for that is to develop the direct realization that understands or perceives directly the nature of reality, and cultivating that in order to eradicate the mental afflictions and thereby attain one's own liberation. And liberation is a permanent, irreversible goal which Buddha taught. But for Mahayana persons, for persons of deeper understanding, then that's not a satisfactory goal for a number of reasons, mainly recognizing the importance of one's relationship and obligation, responsibility to all sentient beings, to recognize that they are in the same condition, samsara condition as you yourself, and that's your duty to take on the goal of trying to save not only yourself, but them as well. And then in order to do that, you have to recognize that the sole means of doing that is to achieve supreme enlightenment, that state, that ultimate state of realization will give you the ability to lead all sentient beings to that same goal. So you have to reflect in that manner when you think to yourself that is your true goal, that is your main goal, and that in order to do that, you have to undertake the training and learn the Dharma's teachings, then with that idea, then you should have the intention that by listening to this teaching, that will serve to help you to further yourself along towards that ultimate goal.
어다데 인도 아니 탄다데 가서 그래. 텐데도 봐 자주 남게 되다. 장고랑 무슨가 봐 첨부연 바래. 내신이 부충was. 어디 인도 다다 장고랑 무슨가 봐 첨부게 제가 루주다 직시 그거 이내 다 제시 잡아셔야 되죠. 말했어라 셔야 가면 다 이내 장고랑 무슨가 봐 첨부게 가서 그래. 도저 투모 남줄라. 달롬니 차상주 줍사회 쇼고텔라 아니 동반이게 땡도 아니 자제 남자 탐제 아니 세대도 태도가 됐다 아니 좀 미시고 소시 담 미미시고 소시 되게 수입되는 거 동님 동백 알에다 그 가서 그래 자제 남자 탐제 태도야게 되게 다 남자 됐다 그래서라 투비 심바지 마중인 바티 진짜 지나서 개개 조제다 린다와레다 아니 단다 되게 단위 실수하고 되는 간데 송유가 내주들에 가면서 말 뒤인데다 조다 주주 잡아양 아니 개개 기도스 미다 미는 시체는 돈이 아니 된데 토라 아니 간에 돈 저용들 아니 시다 가서 거래 마고야 된대다 아니 지고 다 주주 잡아야 그거면도 송해야 된대다 아니 주주 잡아야 게 네 가를 나와대 아니 신제 때문에 마샤쇼 아니 계셔셔 됐다 간제 가서 신대 친구니 근데나 야가 빈도 어ten주 슝다니 마게 వచ్చి 대다 슝라 세베 돈이 아니 네 랍샤조데 아니 신제 잡쇼 소소다 신대 친구니게 슝다니 가서 그래 망게 주고 그래 소다 신대 친구니 어텐데 그 돈에 텐데 송베 돈에 아니 장골로 마버친다 야가라 배야게 데스코 이거 타고 남제게 센도 아니 야갈라야 로냐 나가 배야게 데데 지금 투로 코네 아니 다 소간에 봐 배야 제체인데 아니 소가 남바 잔제 소가 남바 잔제 다 간제 무시제 아니 참아도 저 두가 뭐 임바 어다티 코란게 다 간제 제일 뭐지 근데 배고요 봐 장달 책에서 나네 다 제일 먼저 배우고 간 출음 제마든지 가고 요 같은데 저는 노사다가 백텐데 배우도 텐데 라야다니 고나만이 아니 최고 돌을 먹고 나야다 아니 답변도 다 가서 그래 야갈에 배야 될때도 숨이 봐 대송때 제일도다 야갈 배워이나 딱 간제 버게 가서 그래 내린다 도저히 된게다 캠보는 된 페미스 템바도 돌 편도 전부 시우 용사래다 시우 용사때 얘네다 기도도 좀 가가 안에 조만토가 샤다 진짜 아니 전속 꾸지 선서 말했어 된데 계준도서 된데 시우가 될라 때네 아니 단다테 가서 그래 장불랑 무슨 거 가지고 자갈 배야 돼 치대 나네 아니 요가 주는 아니 사장이네 사장네라 배 대체네 아니 요가 주는 딱 이제 사장난 또 방부 친구 시우질라니 면제 표기 전에 딱 이제 동사 순조 상하다는 도시 지자라서 가면 시제 좀 낙된도다 봄봄전전하는 간서진 신남들라 야가 개발 망부지 여거 나네 아니 야가 또 전부 어tal 노상제 장 무슨 제보서 근데 나니 노상제 단계 제보 부디 빨리 다디 가제 정말로 정말로 정말이야 표현다. 오 딘데게 생각 중에 산지 되니 간제 저거 부디 빨리 다니 생각다 아니 다가 내시 다 조조 받에 다와 잡고 중에서 오다 딘데 세고 될라 때네 다 간제 동바 딘주 동배 된도 다 간제 동배 말이 아니 자세 남자 태도 받대 다 간제 샤투리아 데이터 디렉션 바이는자 아니 데이터네 다 간제 동바 좀 된데라다 간제 동바 딘주 송배 된도 송았다 데려가고 송하면 다 간제 레버셔 님보 된도 또 봐서 자주 나 인사 또 되죠
Duatilana.
오래래 좀 주세
So I can't remember everything you said personally, but the essence of it which was that it's important, it's appropriate at the outset of teaching this text to give some background to it. So that's what Rinpoche was describing, how this text came to be composed. So it's composed by Jangön Lama Tsongkhapa Tienpo. Tibetans refer to him as the great protector Je Tsongkhapa, who is considered to be inseparable and united with the essence of Manjushri, an emanation of Manjushri, so to speak. But then in Tibetan, tradition, Je make the statement that even though that's his true nature, the way he appeared to ordinary people, Tumom and Nangon, is as a human being, ordinary human being, and his life was an example to his followers of the career spiritual paths that one should undertake to further one's spiritual development. That kind of setting, so Jangön was a consummate scholar. He had studied the major Indian treatises and reached a point in his career where, even though he had studied Buddhist philosophy, especially the philosophy of the Middle Way school, he was concerned about the fact that he had not yet achieved an exact or precise realization, understanding of the nature of ultimate reality. And so that was kind of something that was his major concern. He had studied with a number of teachers. His main Madhyamika teacher, one of his main Madhyamika teachers, not the principal one, was Sakya Lama Rindawa Shunu Lodra, I think Shunu Lodra. He studied the text with him, particular Chandakirti's Middle Way, Entry into the Middle Way treatise, Madhyamika Avatara. So it wasn't that he hadn't studied the material, but he just had, the nature of the subject matter was such that he was not able to resolve the two truths, how relative truth and ultimate truth were entirely compatible. That's kind of the essence, or the most difficult point about right view. So he was very absorbed, or say very intent on trying to clarify that. So there's a number of events in his life that took place that brought him to a level of correct realization. So he through another teacher, he had achieved the ability to have visions of Manjushri, and so Manjushri became like his mentor, and he would ask questions. He would kind of address the deity and say, this is my understanding. Is it correct? Can you help me understand? So Manjushri would respond to him. And at one point, Manjushri said, follow my advice. Manjushri gave him sort of inspired, instruction, and also advised him to consider the, Indian treatises, the major Indian treatises, especially those associated with the so-called Shingde Choje is the Tibetan term uh, which is kind of a metaphorical term. It literally means a charioteer or a chariot. Comes from an Indian term. In the context of religious philosophy, it means a person who opened the way to a new system, a new philosophical system. And among them, the two major Indian Mahayana philosophers were, of course, Nagarjuna, and then also Asanga, Arya Asanga. He was Tsongkhapa was advised to to study both of their works and to not consider any of them to be in any way mistaken or in error. In addition to that, then Tsongkhapa at one point formed the thought that perhaps he should go to India. And since there were still, Buddhist teachers in India, and he thought if he went there, he might be able to find someone, for instance, at the great Indian monastery of Nalanda, and through consulting with them, studying with them, maybe that would be the best way to, attain a correct understanding of right view. So he formed that idea, and he had a core of 8 close disciples, and he was going to travel there accompanied by them. So during this period of time, he also heard about and had not yet met a Tibetan master in southern Tibet, Hoka, the southern area of Tibet called Hoka. The master's name was Nangka Gyaltsen, Drupchen Nangka Gyaltsen. He was a realized master, and he was that master was someone who had achieved the ability to communicate with Vajrapani in particular. And so Tsongkhapa had heard about him through, just other scholars and the environment in Tibet was he was well known. So he had thought to reach out and meet him, send him a letter asking to meet him, and then try to keep it short. So he did, in fact, meet him. Rinpoche mentions some comments saying about how there was an extraordinary kind of both the master and Lama Tsongkhapa had extraordinary experiences prior to the direct meeting. At any rate, they did, and received teachings mutually. Each one taught the other, and during that time, Tsongkhapa asked used or requested that Lhasa Drupchen would perhaps address Vajrapani on his behalf and ask him about his intentions, his plans, and so he did. And Vajrapani advised him not to go to India. That if you went to India, in particular, it would be a hardship to travel there. The climate was, not suited to Tibetans, and some of his disciples might succumb. And so he didn't need to go, and he told him not to go. So he decided, in fact, to put it off. That's a significant event. So not long after that, again, through the advice of Manjushri, he was instructed to go into retreat and not to try to study more with other teachers, but rather to try to, purify himself spiritually and meditate, and that would be a more successful, process to follow. So he had already undertaken various meditation retreats, and he went to a place, Wolga Chulung, which is also in Zhang, in mountains, and he went into retreat at that time. Just according to the accounts, he practiced purification in the early part of this retreat, making confession to the 35 Buddhas. There's still a special rock which he used to make mandala offerings is still identifiable there at that place. And so he had a vision of the 35 Buddhas as a sign of his purification. And then at one point, so he had a dream. He was studying and he had a dream. In that dream, he saw 5 great middle-way Madhyamika school masters. Didn't mention the name of them, including Nagarjuna, Deva, Buddhapalita, Baba Viveka, I think. That's 4, and the 5th one might have been. And so in that dream, among them, maybe Chandakirti, Buddhapalita in particular, Buddhapalita was a predecessor of Chandakirti, and Manjushri had told Tsongkhapa that he should concentrate on Chandakirti's works, that they were really, what should I say, very correct presentation of right view. In any case, Buddhapalita was someone that lived several generations before Chandakirti and had written a commentary to Nagarjuna's root treatise on wisdom, 26th chapter, most central work of the Madhyamika school. And so in that dream, Tsongkhapa dreamt that Buddhapalita took his commentary. Tibetans call it Buddhapalita, but that's actually his name. And so he touched it to Tsongkhapa's head, perhaps gave it to him in his hands. And according to his biographies, the next day, when he was reading Buddhapalita's commentary. I think it was in the 18th chapter. And it was while reading that chapter that he had an epiphany. And so that was the moment at which he gained unerring understanding of the nature of emptiness, how to understand it perfectly. And needless to say, it was a monumental event in his life. And so within a few days of that experience, out of recognition, gratitude to Buddha for teaching dependent origination, meaning that the true meaning of dependent origination is that emptiness and the objects of causality are not in any way incompatible. They're supportive of each other, and so that's kind of the key point that's being addressed in the poem. And so he wrote this, describing his experience and not making it personal, but describing the nature of understanding right view, and in the course of doing that, also expressing his devotion to Buddha Shakyamuni for having taught him.
다 담보디 초조된 말이다.
Yes.
지금 가서 우리 간시 생시 송바에 캔다 돈바 나나면 야와된제 자와주 생시 돈바 텔라데스 다 강시 생시 송바에 수용도 다 간제 시리아데 가르에서나 다 공도 주바나시 아니 땡중 툴라 땡데제 따스네 땡중을 따지 다 간제 동바 아니 식바데 말에 식신 아니 식수 송바에 지산 식바 난신게 하나 두절마 가서 그래 동바 땡주 동배 튼도 다 간제 송바 캔다 동발라나 매 수연도 다 간제 캔다 동발라나 매서 다 준제 텔라데네 다 간제 땡중 동배 튼도 아니 코와다 동바 땡주도 진데 직도 샤도 캔바 데이터 캔발라나 매바 다 두절라는 가서 소소치다 캔바 난신신이 두절마 뜸바디 다 동발라나 매바 소치 캔다 동발라나 매 어디인데 다 지금 당분이부 되겠다. 가서 그래. 단대디 최근 당부되게 강시 세주 송바 인스 강한 강시 세주 송바 인스 강한 간제 뚜유 뚜유가 연대되 계시고 연대 간주 가서 그래 강시 연대 강다 dembe 대양 연대의 무슨네 아니 그 연대대다 dem바들 차차로스다 연대 강다 강데서 강시 세주 송바 인스 강시 세주 소도다 람든 타도 소체 람게 타도 소체 강시 세주 송바 예수도 현지 터도 소지 다랑도 신도 니가 터도 어 켄다 도바 라나 메스 오다 텐데고 줄라 뎀베덴 가서 뚜유 텐다 뎀 뚜유 텐다 와데 줄라 뎀바텔라 아니 켄다 도바 라나메 야와텐제 자와 준 세주 도바데 세주 돈바 텔라 되서 야로와 세윤도 다 간제 뇽무레 자와 두실레 자와 자와 denji zhuwa zhung, sikshi toba, ta denji zhuwa zhung su kongda yaga, denji zhuwa zhung yun zinji, ta denjung ge kasu tongpe tuyandu sha tuwa, ta kanchi su su chima chi chen ge sikpa nangshin, an duja shen lo domba, ta tela cha tse lo su yundu, ta kanchi karsu bore, ta denju tongpe tuyandu sha denge ge, ta kanchi duja le chima chi chen dom denge ge, ta domba tela cha tse lo su.
So, starting with the first verse, it's up on the screen. This is a custom in Indian culture, Indian scholarship, and followed also in Tibet, that a composition, any work that's being written should start out with a statement of homage. Choje is so means statement of homage. So this first verse is describing that, and so it starts out he who, right? Gangshi is the relative pronoun, right? The one who. In this it says he who, and then it says he who by means of seeing and by means of teaching, right? Is understood to be, I'm looking at the Tibetan, so not following literally the words. The one who, by having seen Tibetan origination understood, and by having taught it also, is the one who is recognized as the unsurpassed knower, right? The one who possesses highest realization. So highest realization refers to Buddha's ultimate wisdom, the fulfillment of his own one's own individual aims, which is to achieve the supreme knowledge that bestows enlightenment, and therefore makes one capable of fulfilling the aims of others in an unerring manner. And then the speaker or teacher, the one who taught that same emptiness, that same ultimate nature of dependent origination, which Buddha Shakyamuni realized himself, and then subsequently taught in an unerring manner to his followers. So the fact that he taught it, and therefore is the unsurpassed teacher, unexcelled teacher, is an indication of his fulfillment of the needs of others. And so that is motivated by compassion. It's through his acts of teaching, especially, that the Buddha was able to lead others. And so the speaker and knower are understood to represent those two qualities: fulfillment of his own aims and fulfillment of the aims of others. In addition, then the verse goes on to refer to, there's actually no word in the verse that says Buddha per se, but the word victor, or here it says conqueror, Sanskrit word jina, means the one who conquered. It means one who conquered all the obstacles, overcame the maras, for instance, and therefore one who is completely free from obstacles. then that victor, but then who is the one who he saw him, and then in the third line, let's see, it's here in Tibetan. In English, it's in the last line, it says, that victor who saw dependent origination and gave it in the form of instruction, it says taught here, I make, I bow to you, I make homage to you.
你接着说。
let's go.
다 직된 고바 진이 바티 자와 말이데 간신 토에 대도바 땡제 자와 좀 송스 다 직된 고바 진이 바 직된 저 고바 수도 다 코에균 어다 간제 코에균 코나조 다 된저 고바 가져 요바데 지도 고바 진이 바티 자와 말이데 자와다 머리 걸다 텔라테네 아니 직된 저 고바 아주 강가 연구하레스 간신 토에 대도바 땡제 자와 좀다 간신 초 강시 통에 대도 봐서 다 땡제 좋아 중어서 다 땡제 좋아 중어데 통화이나 다 간제 대자와 머리보다 더 두고서 다 간제 단대 가서 된다데 대시고 요인 버려 대인도 다 간제 가서 그래 자와 머리보다 독제도 요나 맨난데 다 간제 땡제 좋아 중어데 인 버려 머리보다라 다 간제 가서 그래 강사가 단지다 추지 단지 룩들라 강사 단지도 추지 단지 니가 머리벌 샤고 요요 머리 담보 나셔다래 신주 다게 대셔만라 수주준다 로마면 돌아니지들 되게 단다 나다 나요 어젠다 다 간지 난지니부터 다 텔라테네 다 간지 대코 자와 쳐와 텔라테네 다 간지 가서 우리 지든 구바 당가 지든 구바 지든 그준 하다 날에 다 용수 속바데 다 텔라테네 연구요 말에 연구 어리스타 연구 어리스타 배나 단대디나 대 가서 그래 년주 전주선로 공제 세배 자와죠 민의 대제 땡데도 탈라 베스 또 땡데도 탈라 베고 그래스 라오르마도 돈이도 서 땡제 저와 중한테 딱 한지 동반이 또야 그 탑 연하면나데 단지 마르바데 좀야 연하면나데 딱 한지 땡제 저와 중한테 인데 딱 지름 부제 땡제 저와 중한테 쉬우지 나번 디치부도 로 답변에 단다 되나를 중으로 가서 그래 다들 되나를 오마 주변나라 녀모조나말에 지조라 달래 줘발이 다니 대요도 동네 내줘봐야 다니 고바체스 녀모조나말에 중 녀모조나말에 좀 달래 대줘 다지 녀모조 용수 줘봐 대다 직달래 되는 거래서 되는 직달이 딱 간제 직달이 딱 거야 자와 지원자 다 조도 직달의 방고 그래서 다 된저 네 직바인 바다 간제 어디 질랍다
네 직바
녀모조나 몰레지 달래 좀 다니 대요도 통지 내줘봐야 다니 고바체스야다 단다디 지금 고바 진여 바티 자와 말이데 간시 통에 대도가 땡저 도와 좀 송세셔와 다 된저 간제 네 직거래다 조조데 가래서는 머리바디 마도나 머리바디 깨체네 다 차담문선라서 용수 조바디 갈라되는 것은 단지 머리부터는 용어인가 다 간제 단지 머리바디 매버 송거때 다 땡저 도와 좀 세네리 직다 세네리 다 간제 오다 담이 되게 싫어 세네 민담은 가르다 와 있네 다 간제 머리바디 매버 자와 머리바디 매버 소고 그래서 딜라고라.
So the second verse then is addressing, you can say, the importance or the need to gain an understanding, to learn, to gain a proper appreciation, understanding of the nature of the doctrine of dependent origination. So the verse starts out by saying, he says degenerations. It says is whatever misfortune, whatever difficulties, even you could say, there are as many as there are, meaning in their entirety, they all have their root in one thing, and that is ignorance. And so it's understood that dependent origination, gaining a knowledge of dependent origination, is the means of reversing it. So it says, the third line says, that which through being seen reverses it, is that the seeing of which will undo this ignorance. It's only ignorance only once, but here because it's understood. Then you taught, right? You taught dependent origination as that subject which through its realization will enable you to reverse ignorance and thereby eliminate all your suffering, all your misfortunes. So this in this verse, there are many key, sort of say, doctrinal points or ideas which can be drawn out to understand it fully. So, so when it says ignorance, so the various ways of understanding ignorance, in particular, there are two kinds of. So in Tibetan there is a phrase "dangzin," "datut zimba." "Datut zimba" literally means grasping a self. And so so we have to understand everything from the point of view of the Madhyamika Prasangika school, Chandakirti school, which Tsongkhapa is following and basing all of his teachings on. So Dangzin Marikpa means the ignorance in the form of grasping at a self. That self means an essence. So there's two kinds of real essence. The essence, the non-existent essence of a real person. Then that's one form of ignorance. The second form of ignorance is the belief that entities, dharmas, five skandhas, for instance, the external world, all perceivable entities are real. They appear to be real, and then if you believe that, you're subjecting yourself to the second kind of ignorance, which is grasping at the real existence of entities. So these are the two forms of ignorance that are understood here. So kind of in the most basic, not basic, but kind of the most conventional Buddhist teaching is that of selflessness. Selflessness, which is generally understood to refer to the personal self. And so that subject of how to understand that there's no real personal self, it has a lot of ways that need to be examined in order to come to the ultimate understanding of selflessness of the person. And so the unique teaching of Chandakirti's school is that the selflessness of the person and the selflessness of entities are on equal footing. They both represent emptiness. They both are a form of emptiness. And the opposite of that emptiness is to believe that the personal self exists, has a real essence. The opposite of the second form of ignorance is the belief that entities have some form of real nature or essence. So, so both of those are implicit in this word ignorance here. So then Rinpoche quoted two verses from the Madhyamika Avatara. The first one, I don't know if I can even, but the first verse that he quoted comes very early in the text, and it describes the way in which one forms the belief, the mistaken belief in a person. So there's that belief, the technical or the classic term for a belief in a real self is called Satkaya Drishti. Satkaya Drishti means the view regarding the perishable assemblage, if you like. So that's has two forms to it. Mistaken belief in a personal self, it's expressed in terms of the personal pronoun, I and mine. So you believe that you consists of a real personal self, then that's an I. And then everything starting from your body and your mind belong to that or pertain to that self. And that's a belief in a mind, M-I-N-E. So those two aspects of that mistaken notion are the first form of ignorance. Then in the main Manimagara Avatar's work has the main chapter is the sixth chapter. It's very long, and towards the end of the sixth chapter, when Chandrakirti addresses the selflessness of that person, he talks about what it consists of. And so that notion of that selflessness is understanding it at a more subtle level than other Buddhist schools, explain. So there's a lot of, what should I say, interpretation that goes into explaining all of that. So the other form of ignorance is the belief that things, that objects, that entities that we perceive, other than the self, themselves also are real. And so the question is, which of those is the main cause of all our troubles, all our misfortunes? And it's they're both. The point is that they're both those forms of ignorance are at the most subtle level the belief that they have some kind of objective, independent reality to them, and so that needs to be analyzed. And so how do you reverse that notion that things are self-existent? And so what Tsongkhapa realized in his experience was that the ultimate meaning of emptiness is that all things are dependently ascribed. So the notion of being dependently ascribed means they don't have any independent essence of their own. If you understand that, then you will eliminate the mistaken notion that there is some objective essence that things possess. So here Tsongkhapa is saying that the Buddha, in his own realization, and Tsongkhapa following him, attained that understanding, and that's the true meaning of dependent origination.
자, 강시통에 대도가 땡제 저와 중앙서 다 다다 되네 각 대금네 때문에 땡제 저와 중앙서 땡제 참무din bar 다 지다 땡제 되라 땡제 차라 숨스 시르요 말. 다 간제 줄라 되네 대부 중앙에 땡제 임발 줄라 되네 대부 중다 셈삼바 라소바다 된적에 대치고와 아니 샤실라 되네 차진 샤바데 로와 샤실 되네 차진 샤바데 안 땡제 임발 어디다 런주 받아야 돼 땡제 다 단다 대가서 땡제 세야데 간제 되네 샤바 당시 들라 아니 최대다 데 딱와 대삼지 다 간제 땡제스 어따 땡제 때래 타라 숨을 요바네 단다 대가 땡제 저와 중세도 다 당시 들라 딱점지 다 간제 어디 대도어디 아니 땡제 세야 돼 땡제다 아니 단다 대가서 대자와 머리 돼서 머리 버들라야 아니 렌데 라고는 뭐 머리 버서야 되다 아니 가서 대권한일라 뭐 머리 버서 니요 뭐 단다 대가서 다소 대권한일라 랑시 두바 집에 집마들 뭐 머리 버 대권한일 뭐 머리 버 샤버 레스 어디지라.
Okay, so as we start to delve into the subject of dependent origination, here, based on the second verse, it's worthwhile to make the observation that the doctrine of dependent origination has a number of interpretations that have different levels of subtlety. So in Tibetan, cha and rak, chawa and rakpa. Chawa means more subtle, rakpa means rougher. So at one level, our ordinary, what should I say, our ordinary view that causes the what should I say, the convergence of all the necessary causes are sufficient to, or necessary and sufficient to give rise to results. And so that refers to, so there's an outer causal process and there's an inner causal process. The inner causal process is the one that relates to our own existence. The outer causal process, for instance, crops, seeds, and grain, for instance. So that's kind of the most basic or most rough form of dependent origination. So that's saying, for example, that the mistaken belief in a real personal self produces is the necessary condition to create karma, and that karma leads to rebirth, for example, in the most general way. So that's the first level. Then so that's associated with so in the kind of the, what should I say, the range of different Buddhist philosophical schools. From the point of view of the Prasangika school, which is considered kind of the culmination of Buddhist philosophy, everything other than the Prasangika middle way school, from their point of view, is considered a realist school. It's considered a realist school because they cling to one degree or another on the notion that there must be some kind of objective status to entities in order to be able to differentiate between, what actually occurs in the world and what is erroneously perceived to occur in the world. So the first one that we just referred to and just talked about sort of covers the Yogacara school all the way down to the realist schools of the two main Hinayana systems, because the Yogacara school believes in a real mental substance. And the other schools, the lower schools, believe not only in real mental substance, but also real physical entities. So we climb to the higher schools, in the middle way school. So there are mainly two branches. The middle way school that is called, what do they call it? The independent, the Rangyubas, they believe in the necessity to prove the object of emptiness by using independent syllogisms. That's what a swatantra is. Swatantra means independent. So they also believe in some kind of subtle objective reality. And so for them, for example, they explain dependent origination to mean that they exclude from it uncaused entities. They say that dependent origination refers and describes then so-called conditioned entities, Je. And so those saying all conditioned entities, impermanent entities, are such that their existence is dependent on a collection of parts. And so based on a collection of parts, we cha, right? Cha means parts. Choeje means an entity that exists is something that has a relationship to its parts. So that's kind of a more subtle form of dependent origination, because as a form of middle way school, they have a notion of emptiness. However, it is not complete, shall we say. So the Prasangika school, which is the third school, is a little bit, it takes the process to a more radical position, which is saying that all things, both uncaused, both causally produced entities, impermanent entities, and permanent things like space, for instance, and nirvana, for instance, another permanent entity. Emptiness itself is a permanent entity. Those objects, their existence is their existence is completely dependent on a basis, so to use the Tibetan phrase, dakshi. Dakshi means a basis of ascription. It means the basis of ascription is some idea, some kind of perception which we have, and which forms the basis for forming the determination that persons exist, that our bodies exist, that our mind exists, and so on. And so that level of determination, of dependent origination, is considered then the most profound. So we have these three general, ways of interpreting the doctrine, which have their value, but then ultimately the highest interpretation is considered to be that of the Yogacara school. I'm sorry, the Chandakirti's Madhyamika school. Likewise, when we talk about ignorance, for instance, there are various forms of ignorance. For instance, ignorance about the nature of karma and its results, right? Not believing that our actions motivated by certain thoughts, good or bad, produce conditions for future experiences. Then that kind of ignorance is addressed by Buddha's teachings on the doctrine of karma, for instance. But here we're not talking about that ignorance. Here, the ignorance that's being referred to is ignorance regarding the ultimate nature of things. So the idea that things have some self-existent or independent mode of being. And so that's the form of ignorance that is being addressed in the second verse. We'll leave it at that.
다 대절로다 덴바에 덴제 조와 주야람 추제 덴베 내뉴도 제다군도 추미 조르스도 다 덴데인데 남주도 덴베 로다 덴베 아니 지이나 덴제 조와 주 텔라테네 아니 동바니 내야 람티 추제 덴베 람티니 람티 때문에 내뉴도 제다군도 람데 덴베 내디뉴도 제다군도 추미 조르스 다 수인에 다들 아니 배전치 마치고 수용 그래서 제다군도 추미 조르스 다 공도 주바 아니지면 이제 제보 그래서
So the third verse kind of follows up on the second one. The second verse is saying that, dependent origination is the most important thing to realize because it's the one and only means of reversing the ignorance that's the cause of all our troubles. So then the third verse is saying, if that's true, and it says, if you're an intelligent person, then how could you not recognize that that's the most important point? That's the most important teaching. The path that leads to that understanding is the most important element of your teaching, means the Buddha's teaching. So how could his followers not recognize that this understanding of emptiness that I gained in my unique insight is the most important path that we should seek to gain knowledge of.
다 디줄라 대단한 근절라 되거든요 수식이 되는 중앙 송발령 맞아줘 지시 다 준제 대다인데 공부철라니 간제 된저 도와줘 돈이 아니 동반이 내야게 다또 앞도고 수식이 아니 앞도고는 수식이 되는 중앙 송발령 맞아줘 대lal하고 다 가서 버려 수무야 매den가 좋아 인자 대lal하고 다 간제 못 참아 아니 지시에서 뭐 사와요 말이야 다 되는 뒤도는 되고 될라고 돼요 말이야 다 손한테
So verse 4 saying this is the most important thing to understand. How could you not realize this is the key point that needs to be pursued? And then the fourth verse is kind of interesting in the sense that it kind of suggests the kind of response which was engendered in Tsongkhapa when he had this experience. So it's like, this is the most important thing which Buddha taught. I've now realized it. And then he kind of has this overwhelming sense of awe and reverence towards Buddha for having taught it. And so he says, what more, what better way is there to praise you, not the true teacher, right? What more marvelous way is there to praise you, right? What could one find, right? Chichi Nye means what could be found. What other means of, if somebody wanted to praise you as the, the infallible source of our own spiritual, salvation is through the fact that you taught this unique teaching. And so it's expressive of how he was moved by that realization, that the fact that he found it, the sense of marvel and wonder and just extraordinary, sense of gratitude is what the saying here says. Wonder, the idea of wonder is meant to convey that kind of attitude.
다디쇼라 강강견라 라려와 대대란시 개동시 소원들의 양저 레도스니 지시에 수도다 최강다 강인네 견라 라려의 존재지 다란시 주변 동아 레스라 소야데 다티베 메세 할레베 다 간제 소원들의 야친거다 델레 아니 레버 도모지 치가 요 말에스다 페나 가레스나 다 아란주와 면제 된저 도와 존재지 근데 랑시 두바레스 거로다 간지 랑시 두바레스다 랑시 모두데 샤투고 마로다 간지 오티 샤투고 메와 인자다 켄라 라레와 인자 코랑문에 도요 마레스다 켄라 라이블 켄라 라바나 단다 데나 요로 마도요쇼 다시 켄레 제바 테마제 텔레케와 랑시 요마이 켄라 라이 칸요 동바셰스 간시 켄레 제바 테마제 텔레케와 랑시 요마이스 켈라라요 가 동바셰 다 마주 돌레 들이 숨어라 저 간시 kel레 잡아데 랑신 해요 말이스 간시 kel레 잡아데 마지 텔레케와 랑시요 말이스 켈라라요 가 떠바시 켈라라레바데 다 떠바 주스리 시나시 친단다 강가 켈라라레바 데데 랑신 그 동바레스 다또 수야 텔라하바다 로도 가스도미야 치가요 말이스 다 간지 쉬우지 수야는 초도 주바.
So verse 5 is now addressing the doctrine itself and its unique characteristic as interpreted by firstly Nagarjuna and then his correct followers such as Aryadeva, Buddhapalita, and of course Chandrakirti. So the verse again uses this word of Yansemba. Yansemba and Motsawa are more or less identical. Yeah, so it's a kind of sense of Huntoro in Tibetan is kind of colloquial for amazement, right? So it says, what's amazing about the way the most subtle understanding of dependent origination is, of course, the kind of explicit, language for describing dependent origination is that entities, the existence of entities, depends on conditions, right? All things are conditioned. So that's the first line says, gang, gang, whatever, anything whatsoever. Repeating it twice means anything and everything, you could say in English. Which depends on conditions. Means anything and everything that depends on conditions. It seems to be positing how to understand the way things exist. So for the two main Madhyamika schools are the Swatantrikas, the ones who claim that it's necessary to use independent syllogisms, that's the only way to establish emptiness. And then the prasangikas, prasanga means an indirect proof, or another term for that kind of argument is reductio ad absurdum, right? That's saying that your position leads to contradictions, and so that using contradictions to prove emptiness is a more subtle methodology. So the essentialists, right, the ones that are the middle way school, such as Bhaviveka and many other persons who claim to be interpreting Nagarjuna, they believe that interpreting dependent origination in terms of the doctrine of causes and conditions in order to differentiate between that which conventionally does exist, that when you establish the causes and conditions for a thing's existence, you thereby prove their relative essence, that they have an essence that only exists relatively, doesn't exist ultimately. And that's kind of the fundamental distinction between the Svatantrikas and the Prasangikas. Chandakirti, on the other hand, says the fact that things are dependent, the fact that things exist on the basis of conditions, what that really means is it has no independent essence of its own. And that notion of conditionality is meant to prove that things are totally dependent. Their entire existence is defined by the conditions by which the relative existence of something is even conceived of. But that doesn't posit that it has any kind of independent mode of being, even conventionally. So that's what Tsongkhapa is talking about in verse 5. He's saying, whatever is dependent on conditions, what that actually means is that everything is void of any independent mode of existence, other than any mode of existence whatsoever, other than the fact that it's dependently ascribed. And he says, what more amazing instruction could there be than that?
강도수의 제반놈 탄생 청원 땡자바 테니켈라 조버 다오몰로 쮸베고스 다 강도수의 제반놈 수도 다 간제 란주바 멘데 샤고요 강도수의 제반놈 다 간제 땡자 조와주 준제지 랑시 주바레 세야다 랑시지 메나 메부그레 세야다 간제 어디 숭 땡게게 제반놈 탄생이 타르진베다 테니게 칭와치고레스 랑시지메나 매국으로서도 가소거래 군대부서 차도거라 아니 가소고요나 랑시 두고 땡저 도와 주바이나 랑시 두고래서 답은 디니게 탄지 디니게 소소 라 가소고 시주의 칭바체가 아니 칭바디 땡보치고래서 다 디니 켈로 도바이 도모로 저고 스도다 디니 켈바이 켈로 도바이 스타 공도샤바나체 랑시지 초담자 랑시지 모두보다 대안이 땡저 도와주게 준생기 라시 모두 소야 디니기 켈바이 아니 켈라 도바이 다오몰루 다 단지게 타와도도 강하면 몰루바니 쩌고 어텐디 신도 마동베스 다 덤바 텐디 다 덤바 초랑 덤바 딜레 아니 덤바 신도 마동에 덤바 셰셰 초랑데스 다 신다 단도 공도 쇼바네 저 신다도 다 무디발라 소바 대다 덤바도 와제라 생게 민다와나 와제라니 생게신 무디잖아 장비세스다 장비시스다 계자 다차보자 좀 찍르체네 찍르니 다 광고체네 산제르 좀 망고 라이어도 정모베네서 많이 모신도 좀 망고 따야로 또 무디 남나 무디잖아 장비치 오다 디스고서 장비치 어디 장비치서 어디 받을라다.
So now we'll take the next two verses together, verses 6 and 7. Starting with 6th verse, this is addressing now the nature of the object to be refuted, the object to be abandoned, which is the perception that things are self-existent, the perception that things have some real essence that is their mode of being, right? Rashingi Drupa. Rashingi Drupa means to exist by way of a real nature, to exist by way of a real essence. Not only from the point of view of ultimate, but also from the point of view of relative. So saying that notion that things have some independent mode of being, that all other beings, and particularly here he uses the word jiva. Jiva is a term that means a child in general. In the spiritual or in the text in philosophical works, it refers to anyone who has not perceived ultimate truth and achieved the status of an Arya. So generally, all those persons who have not gained realization of ultimate truth, then they are perceiving things. Even those who have achieved direct realization of ultimate truth, when they return from that realization, objects still will appear to them to be self-existent. Anything that appears to the mind as an object, by its very nature, is going to appear as if it exists on its own. And so all those who have not directly realized that that's a false appearance, those persons are going to accept that things have some independent mode of being. So that appearance of being self-existent, which non-Aryas, don't question, and therefore, by accepting that as valid, as a correct mode of appearance, that serves to strengthen it says, the bond of their grasping at extremes. So the two extremes are the extreme of nihilism, cheta, and the extreme of eternalism, takta. So those two extremes have different levels of interpretation as well. In the Madhyamika school, this extreme of nihilism is the idea that if a thing doesn't have a true mode of being, then it can't exist. There's no way of positing or establishing that it even exists. Rangshingi me means if it lacks any self-existent essence, then that means it must be non-existent. Then that notion is the extreme of nihilism. The extreme of eternalism is if it does exist, it must exist because it does have that mode of existence. So that those two extremes are what ordinary persons do not, have any basis of, rejecting. So because they believe that the false appearance of things is not false, that the things when they appear to our mind as having some actual independent mode of existence, they agree to that apparent nature. What that does is that serves to strengthen their grasping at those two extremes. On the other hand, scholars, like Keva means wise person or learned person. In this case, it would mean the person who understands the true doctrine of dependent origination. Those persons can identify that object to be rejected. The notion that things, falsely appear to have some independent mode of being. And then when they're able to make that determination, they're able to identify that object to be negated, then they recognize that as the thing to disprove, then that becomes the basis for them, right, to cut the net of elaborations. The net is like something that, binds us, covers us, like being caught in a net. And then elaborations generally means the dualistic appearances. Dualistic appearances means then all our ordinary mode of perception is that subject and object. Subject is our mind, perceiving mind, and the object that mind perceives is the dualistic object. And that's our normal, mode of seeing things. That's false. That's erring. That erring perception is, like a net that entraps us. So for the wise, they're able to see through the error in that erring mode of perception, and so it becomes the basis for them to cutting the net of elaborations means gaining access to ultimate reality. So there's this go means the doorway. So understanding what the object that we really need to undermine is the first goal of gaining a proper understanding of dependent origination. And so then it says, nobody except the Buddha taught, right, in this teaching. This teaching means in Buddhism. And then it means especially Buddha's teaching about ultimate truth, Buddha's teaching about ultimate reality. He says, that doctrine cannot be found anywhere else. So then any other tradition, religious tradition, whatever philosophical view that exists in the world that is separate from Buddha's true teaching, then the persons who formulated those systems, no matter what they are, Eastern, Western philosophy, whatever they may be, they lack this unique insight. And therefore, the persons who describe the originators of those systems might refer to the ones who formulated those other systems as the teacher or the master or the one who formulated this other unique tradition. But to call them a teacher is kind of what should I say? From Tsongkhapa's point of view here, is saying they're not the true teacher. So calling them teachers is like calling a fox a lion. So when you do that, so any other teacher from any other tradition that positing some other doctrine than Buddha's teaching about dependent origination, to call such a person sure is is a form of flattery and not a genuine, not a true. They don't deserve the name of teacher the way in which the Buddha does.
다 dunze tende yunde emo tumba emo jab emo macho emo gun tenje dowa jun na tenje de jun le su be tumba tala cha cha los emo tumba se yunde ta kanje emo se do ngosa wa yang chen ba su jere wata emo tumba se yunde ta tenjung de khona ni su su chema chi se ba na shi de jal mo tumba yin za emo tumba emo jab se yunde ta jigden ge ta kuba kanga la ta kanje jigden de na ta kanje kuba kanga le jab tongge jenda emo jab emo macho se ta konda la wa ne she ta ma wa dame se de emo macho ma wa dame so ta tenju tongbe tendu ma wa yin za ta tele chok do ma ya me wa za ma ka so re emo macho emo gun ta jigden gumbo se ya ne shi chen ta kanje kamsu jigden de na ta gun de jab gun ja yena man de emo gun res tenje dowa le sumba toba tela tende yendo ta tenje dowa le sumba tela tende ta di kanga emo chaba emo tong kanga cha yamba o tende go ten gunjab tela tomba tela ni nge cha che yes.
So now verse 8 is then focuses back on the Buddha and addresses him with a sense of wonder, right? So in the first two lines repeat the word Mao, Mao 4 times. Mao is what do we call exclamation, right? Wonderful! How wonderful! Amazing! How amazing! Amazing! It's not a word which means wonder. It's an exclamation. It's like we don't really have a word in English. I would say, "Wow!" So it says. The teacher says to call him the amazing teacher. It says, God says, all right, so there's a reading from the commentary how to differentiate these 4 epithets. So refer to Buddha as Dharma means literally means the teacher. The Buddha is referred to as the teacher with a capital T, means the master, the one who revealed. There is a he said, you are the true teacher, you Buddha Shakyamuni, the Lord of Munis, you are the one who you and you alone are the one who taught the Dharma that is the means of cutting the 2 extremes. Let's say undermining the 2 extremes that lead to the ignorance that produces all the misfortune of samsara. You and you alone are the amazing teacher. No one else is like you in that respect. And then it says,
Tiswa.
No. Gombo is means protector or like savior, right? Savior means that by virtue of having taught this, then you are the one who saves the world, saves beings, right? Then it says, let's see. Then Machok means Ma is
Mawa damya said, Chiwa.
yeah. Ma is a Vada, right? A speaker, right? Someone who proclaims a doctrine. You are the supreme, speaker in the sense of the one who reveals a system. In this case, the system of dependent origination. And then also, finally, Gun. Oh, I'm sorry. Gyab. Gyab and Gun are similar. Gyab is means savior, or Gyab is the word for that's used to in the context of the act of taking refuge, right? So the Buddha is the one who is the source of refuge, right? So he's here. It says refuge. You use the word refuge. And then it says and the fourth epithet is you're a savior, right? Meaning you're the one who liberates. And then it says I make prostration to you. You who are the one who taught this incredible doctrine of dependent origination.
That is all.
Yes.
Penzi shushi dowa la mienpe le to kaze ba, tenpe nyingpo tongpa yin ngebe junze dame ba, tenje dowa chungwe tsuru gawa tenne ma dowa, tonga di ju chida kundu chuba nyus. Ta dowa la ta chukdo penpar ze tenge yani, tongpa chuchi yani dowa la mienpe le to su, ta penpe le to, ta kaze ya de kare sana, yani tenje dowa chungwe, tela tenne tenjung tongpe tendo kwaya derwa, kaze ya ba, tenpe nyingpo tongpa nyi, o terwa ta tenpe nyingpo ta kanche tenche dowa juwe nyingpo tongpa nyi toya ka ni tenchu ta kaze wa de ta tongpa nyi ngebe gyunze ta dame wa de ta chodo juwa de ta kanche tenjung di imbari tenche dowa juwa di imbari o terwa de tenche dowa juwe tsuyo so o terwa dame wa de tenche dowa juwe tsuyo tere es di indi ta gawa tani maduwa thonga di churi chida kundu chun ta gawa tani suyundu ta kanche ranju badi imba ranju badi zu ta kanche rangshi dhuwa indi tenche dhuwa rangshi ji madukde tenche dhuwa benda nyugu chuji rangshi ji mede tenche imbe chisu ta gajab chago rangshi mede su rangshi dhube chapsu korwa gajab ta nyugu chuji tenche indi nyugu chuji ta kasu kore kanda di rangshi ji mede tende imbe chesudana tak tamadu shirwala so tende kelingo marwa chesanta kanju gawa dane maduwa gawa sayate ta kanje tende imbe junzeje rangshinji mewa dubya sabdela rangshi du duba kelingo oro ode gawa te ta rangjuba chawar gawa tani maduwa suyo tati maduwa su chojo maduwa ro nyugu chojo yani rangshi imbe tende imbe chesu tende imbe tamadu slago oro ode ta kanje 통화디 초질로 제다군도 쳐봐 다 간제 랑시 메바 통화하게 연하면 다 된다 메바 때 땡제 도와 주는 데래 그거는데 아니 다 간제 대콩도 막 가서 로를 맞추네 아니 아랑주가 면제 되게 아니 가와레스도 왔어 아니 출발로서 되게 아니 다음도 조조 두면 도서 어디 뒤에서
So the next two verses again can be read together. So the first verse is saying, talking about the Buddha as the one who has benefited the world, right? One who benefits beings. And then they use the word benefit twice. The second use of the word, it says here, is like to heal. But the word heal also can be understood to mean heal in the sense benefit, heal in the sense of benefiting, heal in the sense of, removing their obstacles, right? So it says, how to stop. So it's talking about the subject of verse 9 is the doctrine of dependent origination itself. And it's saying, this verse 9 is saying that the true understanding of dependent origination is the best way, the most effective way, the most the unexcelled way in which to establish the meaning of emptiness. And emptiness itself is the essence of your teaching, right? Tenbei Ningbo. Tenbei Ningbo means the essence of your teaching, which is emptiness, right? So it's saying you taught emptiness. You Buddha Shakyamuni taught emptiness because you are motivated to benefit the world, to benefit all sentient beings. The highest way to benefit all sentient beings is by teaching ultimate reality of emptiness, right? And you taught this in order to save beings, in order to heal beings, as it says here, right? Then the best way, the most effective way to do that is by understanding the doctrine of dependent origination, right? So here in the third line, it says the peerless reason to ascertain emptiness is referring to dependent origination as a reason, right? So in order to establish the thesis, right, in order to prove the existence of emptiness, you have to give a valid reason, right? So that's the gyuzen. And what's the object to be proven is emptiness. And so it's saying, so the common formulation of the reason is, karsa, any object, right? Karsa di rashingi me church, karsa. Churching karsa.
누구 주제?
Okay.
다른 누구 주제라는 메데 딘데 베이스.
So you can use as the subject of the argument a sprout, right? A sprout meaning.
제가 다 망고요로, 다 망고쇼 누구 주제 덴바 메데 지도 도마 가면 저에 지세야 다 도저 세메데 망고요로 있는 다 딘데 다 간제 리베 자부
So there are many arguments to establish emptiness, right? And then the dependent origination is considered the king of reasons, the king of proofs. So say the argument, you can word it as take a sprout, right? What grows out of a seed, when the first steps of a plant that arise out of a seed when it's starting to grow. That sprout, Nyugu Choeje, means take that as the subject. That sprout does not have any independent mode of existence. Rashingi mete, right? It has no objective status of its own. Why? Because it exists dependently. So that is a kind of formulation of the argument, using the deepest understanding of the doctrine of dependent origination to prove emptiness. So that's what verse 9 is saying, that you taught emptiness as the best way in which to prove emptiness. But he said said there are those who would take that, or now shifting to verse 10, it says, so this proper understanding of emptiness, right? Denjin Joa Jungwa is emptiness. Denjin Joa Jungwa Tsul means this manner of explaining emptiness in the most profound way. So here, this way of dependent origination. It says anyone other than those who understand the true meaning of ultimate reality, all the followers of other schools, all the realists, all those from, including the followers of the Madhyamika school, such as Bhaviveka and the rest, and everything other than that, not to mention non-Buddhist school, all the Indian, Vedic traditions, for example. It's that if you were to posit this reason to them, to say, take a sprout, it doesn't have any objective status because it's dependently originated. they would look at that argument and they would say that argument is not valid. They would say it suffers the two main, fallacies of an argument. One is that the reason that's given to be dependently originated, right, to exist as a dependent origination, that reason doesn't prove that the object doesn't exist by way of its own essence. Dependent origination proves that it does exist by way of some mode of being. So that is, to say that the correct understanding of dependent origination proves emptiness is using dependent origination in a contradictory way. It proves the opposite. It doesn't prove lack of self-existence. It proves that things are self-existent. Or it doesn't, or you can say it's not conclusive. Madruba means there are two fallacies of an argument. Galois means that it proves the opposite of what you're asserting, meaning it's contradictory, the reason, or it's inconclusive. It may be true, right, but it doesn't prove what you're asserting. So things are self-existent, but that doesn't mean that it proves that things lack a self-existent essence. So all other persons who take the meaning of dependent origination in that less than most subtle way, how could they possibly understand your teaching, your system of the most profound way of understanding dependent origination? How could they possibly understand it? Because their idea about dependent origination is not able to comprehend its deeper level.
그래서 최근 남시 동반이 등주 통도 통하나 라시진이 동바다 자제타와 맹계시 다 최근 남시 동바니 등주 통도 통하는데 랑시 동바 랑싱 동바데라 아니 자제타와 관계 문도스 오다 디스마이 바다디 다디 내가 좀 쉬우인 말다 간제 왜냐면은 지단고라니 땡중시고도 땡중시 땡세지도 중세신이도 땡라와요도 시질라 땡바게자리 중시도다 주제는 되네 칼라디네 질라 중을 깨자와 땡중시 땡중수도 땡실라요도 땡라와요도 가르고도 땡시도 코란게 뭐냐 좀 코란 뭐니 샤모도 어디 질라 땡고 어디 인지 민지 땡세도 딱시 로 딱시질라 마데나 딱시 강다 가이네 추질라 마데나 아니 코란 뭐니 두모도 땡세도 여야 돼다 가서 중세도로 대체 될라데네 중앙 인자 땡중세도 배낭 간주 다나 되나도와 최담제 때네 따고 다질라서 다시대 저 다음에 땅 최담제 때네 따고 임배치서 된도 치고 다 간제 다는 다제네 요로 최담제 때네 따고 임배치서 최담제 때네 수도다 dak실 때네 로 따야데 민장 다정 어디서 어디 단대디 땡중세데 간제 어디 고든 소지 땡중 동배 tun도 동바 땡주 tun도 샤세윤도 답변나 동바 땡중 tun도 샤 땡주 동배 tun도 샤시 그거로 다 간제 다긴 대윤도 답변나 갈수고래 pero 미질라 지 내가 죽고 와이나 지 내가 지 저러 치스 나와이나 나라 라오메 스쿨 나와이나 그 무슨 라오메 뭐 동바도 그 무슨 셔로다 나라 라오메 나와이나 로그 도콜라 라오메 뭐 무슨 셔로 네 라오메 뭐 무슨 셔 용도 가르고걸 콜라 라오메도 다 슬라용도 다콜 떠서 좀 하고 그러 로아디도 슈랑서 네버 딘투도 어 되는 거고 딱 그거서 딱 한지 야 그때 말라와체 나디 미치를 깨져 주고 내 본고를 깨져 주고 내 개개를 깨져 주고 내 젠달을 깨져 주고 라베나 다 무슨 때마데 떠바데 땡고요 때 콜라 라오메가 술 고고도 어디는 뒤인데 딱 간지 땡중 동배 tun도 샤워 동바 땡중 tun도 샤워 다 지구도 샤워 다 간지 삼로 덴지 땅 고고 다 간지 로다 강가 추억한다 강인의 용수 속과 됐다 와 가속을 찔러드는 직시 코랑은 초도 좋아 지가 면도 배나 림부도 통스 라고라다 림부스 라고 통 라고 림부 통 샤면도 찔러드는 샤고도 모두 찔러 맞되나 그 림부에서 콜레링가 여러 다 가지 로 찔러드는 아니 샤고도 샤야 돼. 로 찔러드는 가 림부에 찔러드는 통도에서 또 림부도 통도 코랑은 좀 면도 다 가지 양데 배나 단다데 가속을 빠바다 부서야 돼. 소소 부글 때도 소소 빠바 차 되고 소소 빠바 때도 소소 부차 되고 근데 그 첫 한다 가인에 딱시 될라 때네 딱점지 가 때네 딱점지 모두 코랑win을 두 매와 코랑win을 때네 딱점세 러브 샤용도 코랑win을 두 매와 샤고 딱 한지 로 코랑win을 두고 매바티 라용도 딱 한지 dak시디 코랑win을 두고 매네 여바데 하고 dak시들라 딱점지 하고 뭐딱 한지 어텐데 돈에 딱 한지 찍라도 말해.
So, but now verse 11 puts together the meaning of emptiness and the meaning of dependent origination. So actually it's not a complete statement, right? Even though it ends with a sentence, there's actually at the end of the verse is a conjunction, xing, which means that the full idea is completed in the next verse, right? So it says the verb rather. There's several verbs in verse 11. The first verb is to see, right? So what is to for you? It says, what is that? So it starts out with referring to using the pronoun you to refer to Buddha, saying, and then it says, namshik. Namshik means at a certain time. That certain time means the point at which you gain right view, the point at which you realize that the meaning of emptiness is that of being dependent. The true meaning of emptiness is that things are that do not have any independent mode of being. Their very existence is determined by conditions other than the thing itself, and there is no thing itself. Its very being is totally created by conceptually by one's identifying some basis for labeling things. So when you say that it only exists to that degree, it means it does not have any self-existent. It has no independent mode of being. It's empty of any mode of being. So here it says, when, according to you, for you, upon recognizing, right? So upon recognizing that emptiness means to be dependent, right? Then this is the real key point is the fact that emptiness, the doctrine of emptiness, does not in any way invalidate causality. Causality is the way we normally think of dependent origination. So then the realists think that if you posit the notion of emptiness, that takes away any basis for understanding how one thing produces another. But what Tsongkhapa is saying in this verse is that if you understand what emptiness really means, emptiness is not taking away the existence of things. It's explaining that its true nature is that it's not independent. It's dependent. So Rinpoche gave the example that if you ask somebody, I'd like you to do something for me, I need some help with something, can you do this job for me? Can you do this work? Because that's talking about causality, right? Asking somebody as an agent to do some action to bring about some kind of result. Well, that's talking about the realm of causality. Then if that person that you ask to do something says to you, I don't have the authority, right? Rame means I don't have the independent authority to agree to do this action. I have to ask, somebody that I am responsible to, my teacher or my parents or my boss or whatever the case may be. So that means kind of pointing to some other condition in order to establish that thing as being an agent who can do something. So on one hand, it's saying that the entities that are able to perform actions, able to function in the world that we can perceive cause and effect in relation to, that those things are able to do that, but they do so in a way where they themselves are lacking any independent mode of being that is not conditioned by something else. So nothing about the thing that represents its own separate, unique, unrelated, distinct mode of being. If it did, it would exist as a real thing, as a self-existent thing. So you have to be able to recognize that there's no such quality that things possess. So here are this verse 11. The main essence of it is saying that when you properly understand that things are void means that they lack any true mode of being, right? Here it says intrinsic existence, rangshin, swabhava, some kind of their own mode of being, that they lack that. That's what emptiness is. To be empty of an independent or distinct or self manner of being. The fact that you can recognize that to be the true nature of things, that does not undermine at all that it still allows for the world of cause and effect to be valid. So then the language that's used to describe that in the literature, especially in the Tsongkhapa, uses the word dakshi, dokje, dakje. These three elements are a basis of ascription is dakshi. And dokje means then your mind, your conceptual mind is the thing which ascribes. It ascribes on the basis of some factors. And dakje is then the ascribed entity. So for example, if you perceive your five skandhas, you perceive the entities of your own mind and your own body as entities that exist, then that becomes the basis of ascription. On the basis of that, you conceive of the notion that there is a self, a personal self that governs them. And so that personal self that governs them becomes the ascribed object. But that personal self doesn't have any independent mode of existence other than the fact that it's ascribed by your mind on the basis of the perception of your own five skandhas, for example. So the fact that there is a self, there's not a real self, but there's a nominal self that creates karma, that's subject to the mental afflictions, that undergoes rebirth. But that nominal self has no objective, real essence to it. And yet, by positing that doesn't do anything to negate the notion that you are subject still to cause and effect.
就是说
Yes.
他天天多把碰完呢，动了桥啊，比如说恰到这了，东那边两个人动那些，就电把了定住通来把俺死，他天天多把通完呢，他动把定住通了天天多把，让西里面呢没顾过来，俺看说过来，原来让西就做顾过来，说我他天天多把通完呢，俺那动了，俺那桥让西动了没过，人家桥啊都是刚刚入马的是。恰在这了东面呗， 차다 제발 안에 동바 매 장시 동바 매 와서 양 양아 양도 놓는 시ችን 딱 간제 연한 랑시 주요고 양 딱달로 야만은 랑시지 매나 매고지 체달로 다 양아 양도 놓는 시제 그래서 된대인자 디지주에 담발라 된주 동안에 레버다 납주 치고 요스 어디서 안다리데 뒤즈스는 다 샤샤는 거래.
So, having made that crucial connection between the meaning of emptiness as not negating dependent origination, or as being the true meaning of dependent origination, then verse 12 and 13 are addressing the fact that the inability to recognize that, right? It says, so the previous verse said that you need to be able to understand how emptiness and dependent origination are not incompatible. Miguel means they don't, undermine one another. Positing that things lack any subsistent essence does not, disprove or do anything to negate the doctrine of cause and effect. So then those persons who are not able to appreciate that are going to interpret emptiness incorrectly, and are going to think that emptiness results in nihilism. So it says, "Dele dopa toanan," beginning of verse 12 says, when you see the opposite of that, that is when your mistaken understanding is that things couldn't be empty and dependent at the same time. It says, then the reason that you feel that way is you feel that if things lack any self-existent mode of being, then there's no way in which you can indicate how something has the ability to influence or affect another thing and bring it about, for example. So how can empty objects carry out or perform any kind of effective function? So if you can't resolve the two elements of emptiness and dependent origination, that results in your mistaken idea that empty things are not able to be causally affected. It says you won't be able to believe that, you won't be able to accept that empty things are able to perform functions, and things that are functional couldn't be empty. So that's kind of the two sides of the notion that if something is empty, then that means non-existent. If something is functional, that means it must be self-existent. So those are the two extremes. Then the extremes are eternalism and nihilism. So then there's the eternalistic extreme is a belief, the mind which holds that if a thing is not self-existent, it doesn't exist. But the extreme itself is non-existence rather. The other side is that if the belief that if something exists, it must be self-existent. So that belief is the extreme, in the sense of the mind which holds that. But the actual extreme is the notion of being self-existent. So self-existence and non-existence are the two extremes, and they're described as objects that are like an abyss. So here it says, if you fall into either of those extremes, so use the phrase expression to fall into either of those two extremes, then you will. Nihilism is the worst extreme, because it will lead you to believe that nothing matters, that there's no such thing as causality. And if you believe in the eternalistic extreme, you'll not be able to undermine the ignorance that produces the mental afflictions. So in either case, you fall into the so-called abyss. In Tibetan, yang means like falling over a cliff, and that means the consequences of not being able to reverse those extremes are dreadful. Here I use the word dreadful. It says Nyam Ngawe Yang means a frightening abyss. So it means the abyss of falling into being remaining bound into all the elements of samsaric existence.
就说
That's all.
他这里在想那么嘞，
So I think with that we'll reach the end of the morning class.
那说今年三百干话的，等到多光了看边的，加把学生老三淘宝也，等别人不人都是说，哎，你给我说你不了啊？我你给我按吃的你不？
So we'll resume this afternoon at 2:00. In case you don't already know it, there's lunch is being served outside. Outside, right? I think it's going to be outside.
Yeah, lunch is outside. We're blessed with beautiful weather today, with lots of rain, so there's plenty of seating outside. You can eat in here. There's different places. There's trails and so forth. You can have an event here. There's no cost for any food, but we're more than welcome for donations if you feel inclined. So enjoy lunch. We've got croissant cooking. It's very, very good. Tomorrow is 9. Yeah, I asked Bishop if you wanted to put the tent up last night. Can I
ask a question? How long have you been translating Tibet? I know I've been at other things that you've been translating too, with